In this video, I will share how I do a tubular casting on for a rib consisting of the alternating 3 knit and 3 purl stitches. The tubular cast on creates a smooth edge. The cast on stitches roll over the edge without a visible cast on row. I will show how I do this in the round using a magic loop technique, and will share a special method of a completely jogless joining in a circle. You can see where the yarn tail is. That's the beginning of the round, and the edge is completely jogless. For my sample, I will use a worsted weight yarn. I will be using 3.25mm or US 3 tips for casting on and the tubular part. My circular needle is 97 centimeters or approximately 38 inches, and that's including the tips. And later on I will switch to a 3.75mm or US 5 tip for the rib 3x3. I will also use a blunt tapestry needle to hide the yarn tail and a marker. And this is one additional piece. It's a thin thread of contrasting colored cotton that I will need at the very beginning of this project to mark down the middle of my work when I switch to the magic loop. Before I start everything, I'll tie a knot to make a loop like this that I will use as a temporary marker. For a 3x3 rib, I will need the number of stitches that can be divided by 6. I decided that my sample will be 96 stitches, but that's too many stitches to wrap around the needle, so I will just wrap half of this amount, 48 stitches. And now I take the yarn off the needle and fold it like this to double the length of the yarn tail for the 96 stitches. 48 times 2, 96. And my first cast on stitch is going to be approximately here. For the first stitch, I place the yarn in my left hand like this. My index finger goes under the working yarn and the thumb under the tail. The first stitch is without a knot. I place the needle onto the yarn and make a twist like this. This stitch is a purl stitch. Next, a knit stitch under the tail, over the working yarn, and turn. And the knit stitch looks like a horseshoe. Then under the working yarn, over the tail, and turn. This is a purl stitch. Purl stitches look as if they have a little bump. Again, a knit stitch under the tail, over the working yarn, turn, a purl stitch under the working yarn, over the tail, again under the tail, over the working yarn, knit stitch, under the working yarn, over the tail, purl stitch, under the tail, over the working yarn, knit stitch, under the working yarn, over the tail, purl stitch, under the tail, over the working yarn, a knit stitch. So I have right now 10 stitches and they look like they paired together. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I will continue casting on until I have 96 stitches. Again, it's the number of stitches that can be divided by 6 because the repeat is 6 stitches, 3 knit stitches and 3 purl stitches. The last stitch is a knit stitch. I turn the work around clockwise, making sure I hold the last couple of stitches securely so that the cast-on row will not unravel. And prepare the right hand needle tip. The tubular part has an even number of rounds, usually 2 to 4, to maintain the symmetry. The first row will be worked in the opposite direction, not yet in a circle. I will work only the knit stitches and slip the purl stitches purlwise with yarn in front of work. In the first row only, I will work the knit stitches from right to left to avoid twisted stitches. First, I secure the yarn tail by wrapping it around my ring finger. The first stitch is a purl stitch. I will slip it off from right to left. I move the right hand needle tip under the working yarn like this and into the first stitch from right to left and slip the stitch off and move under the working yarn like this, and right away knit the following knit stitch from right to left. Now the work is secure and I can release the yarn tail. And I continue. The next stitch is a purl stitch. I place the working yarn in front of work and slip the purl stitch from right to left, yarn in front. Next is a knit stitch. I knit the stitch from right to left and repeat. Yarn in front, slip the purl stitch off the left needle, knit the knit stitch from right to left. Again, yarn in front, slip the purl stitch off, knit the knit stitch from right to left. After I have worked 48 stitches, I place my improvised marker. It's very thin, it will not distort the work, and continue. Again, yarn in front, slip the purl stitch from right to left, knit the knit stitch from right to left. Yarn in front, slip the purl stitch, knit the knit stitch from right to left. Last 2 stitches, yarn in front, slip the purl stitch from right to left, and the last stitch is a knit stitch, and I'm going to work it from left to right for an extra twist and for a straight corner. Next, I will connect in a circle. The working yarn is on the right and the yarn tail is on the left. And this is the left hand needle tip. I will move my work all the way from the right to the left needle tip, so it will be ready for the magic loop. Now I want to make sure that my work is not twisted. After I make sure that the cast-on edge is looking inside the circle, I bring the 2 ends together and hold them firmly with my right hand. And again, I want to double check that the stitches are not twisted and the cast-on edge is looking inside the circle. Everything looks good. So now I am ready to switch to magic loop, and I'll be using this improvised marker. This marker indicates a spot where the center of my work is. So that's where I'm going to pull out the first loop of magic loop. So I'll pull out a little bit of the cable and I will pull this cable, the right hand needle, until I make a loop of a good size like this. I'm still holding these 2 ends, making sure the work will not be twisted. And this remaining length of the needle is the second loop of magic loop. In the second round, I will work only the purl stitches and slip the knit stitches from right to left with yarn behind the work. The first stitch is a purl stitch. I move the working yarn in front of work and just tighten the yarn tail for convenience. And then I purl the first purl stitch from right to left as usual. And here it's important to tighten the working yarn because it's a changeover point to avoid the baggy stitches. Release the yarn tail. The next stitch is a knit stitch. I will slip it from right to left, yarn behind. Again, purl the following purl stitch. And slip the following knit stitch from right to left, yarn behind. Purl a purl stitch. Slip the knit stitch with yarn behind. Purl a purl stitch. Slip a knit stitch with yarn behind. Purl a purl stitch. Slip a knit stitch with yarn behind work. Purl another purl stitch. So the tubular edge is taking shape. I will continue working until the changeover point. Here I'm at the end of the first half of the round. Purl a purl stitch and slip off the knit stitch with yarn behind. Now I turn the work around. Make sure everything looks neat. And I will pull out the cable of the left hand needle tip all the way until the stitches will be on the left hand needle tip. A little bit more. Remove the improvised marker and tuck in the left hand needle. And bring the stitches closer to the tip. Like this. This is the working yarn. It's coming out of the right hand needle tip. I pull it out, and this is the second loop of my magic loop. And this is the first loop. So I'm ready to continue. The last stitch was a knit stitch, and it is followed by a purl stitch. Again, yarn in front, and I purl the purl stitch and slightly tighten at the changeover point. Not too much, because the previous stitch was a slip stitch. Slip the following knit stitch, purl a purl stitch, again slip off a knit stitch, purl a purl stitch, slip off a knit stitch, purl a purl stitch, slip off the knit stitch, purl a purl stitch, bring the stitches closer to the tip so I don't overstretch my work, and continue. Slip off the knit stitch, purl a purl stitch, slip off a knit stitch, purl a purl stitch, And I will continue like this until the end of the round. Here I'm at the end of the round. I have few stitches left. So again, slip the knit stitch, yarn behind, purl a purl stitch, slip a knit stitch, yarn behind, purl a purl stitch. And the last knit stitch, also slip off from right to left, yarn behind. The tubular part is now finished. I continue the magic loop, turn the work around, and pull out the cable of the left hand needle tip. Tuck the left hand needle in and bring the stitches closer to the tip. And pull out the right hand needle tip, creating another loop of magic loop. So again, there are 2 loops of magic loop. Before starting the rib, I will change from 3.25 millimeters that I used for casting on and the tubular part to 3.75 millimeters that I will use for the rib. I'm using the interchangeable needles, so I can change just one tip, the right hand needle tip. I simply remove one tip and replace it with another one. And tighten a little bit. I'm only changing the right hand needle tip because that's the tip that determines the size of the stitches. And because the left hand needle tip is smaller, there is more room between the stitches and the needle, so it will be easier to insert the right hand needle tip and to work. This is the beginning of the round. The first stitch is a purl stitch, then knit stitch, purl stitch, knit stitch, purl stitch. And I'm going to change this by first swapping the first 2 stitches. Then I will purl the 3rd stitch and swap the following 2 stitches. I insert the right hand needle tip into the first 2 stitches from left to right and slip them off the left needle. Return the purl stitch back onto the left needle tip and finish knitting the knit stitch. Purl the purl stitch, purl the following purl stitch, now I have 2 purl stitches, and for the 3rd one I will swap the following 2 stitches. Slip the knit stitch off from left to right, slip the purl stitch off from left to right. Insert the left needle tip into both stitches from right to left and return them onto the left needle tip. Purl a purl stitch. So I have 3 purl stitches. Knit the knit stitch. That's knit stitch number 1. Knit the knit stitch number 2. And for the knit stitch number 3, I will swap the following 2 stitches again. From left to right, slip off, return the purl stitch onto the left tip, finish knitting the knit stitch. So there are 3 purl stitches, 3 knit stitches, a purl stitch number 1, purl stitch number 2, and for the 3rd purl stitch, I will again swap the following 2 stitches. Slip off from left to right, slip off from left to right, insert the left needle tip into both stitches from right to left and return them onto the left needle tip, and purl the 3rd purl stitch. 3 purl stitches. Knit the 1st knit stitch, knit the 2nd knit stitch, bring the stitches a little bit closer, and for the 3rd knit stitch, again from left to right, slip off 2 stitches, return the purl stitch onto the left tip, and finish knitting the knit stitch. 3 knit stitches, followed by again purl stitch number 1, purl stitch number 2, and for the purl stitch number 3, again swap 2 stitches, slip left to right, slip left to right, insert the left tip from right to left and return them on the left tip, purl the purl stitch, knit the 1st knit stitch, knit the 2nd knit stitch, left to right, slip 2 stitches, return the purl stitch on the left tip, knit the knit stitch, purl the purl stitch, purl the following purl stitch, slip the 1st stitch left to right, 2nd one left to right, left needle tip from right to left and return them on the left tip, purl the purl stitch, and again knit a knit stitch, knit another knit stitch, and for the 3rd knit stitch, insert the right tip left to right and slip the stitches off, return the purl stitch on the left needle tip, and finish knitting the knit stitch. So there are 3 knit stitches. Again, purl stitch number 1, purl stitch number 2, and for the purl stitch number 3, swap the next 2 stitches, slip off, insert the left needle tip from right to left and return them onto the left tip, purl the third purl stitch, 3 purl stitches, knit stitch number 1, knit stitch number 2, and for knit stitch number 3, insert again from left to right, slip off, return the purl stitch onto the left tip, and finish knitting the knit stitch, 3 knit stitches, purl stitch number 1, purl stitch number 2, and swap the following 2 stitches, slip off, insert the left tip from right to left and return them onto the left tip, purl the purl stitch, and this is what it looks like. The first stitch is a knit stitch, then 3 purl stitches, 3 knit stitches, 3 purl stitches, 3 knit stitches, and so on. I will continue until the changeover point. Here I am close to the changeover point. Purl the first purl stitch, the second purl stitch, swap the next 2 stitches, slip from left to right, slip from left to right, insert the left needle tip into both stitches from right to left and return them onto the left tip, purl a purl stitch, so I have 3, and I have 2 knit stitches left, 1, 2. I finished half of the round. Turn the work around. Just make sure it looks neat. And pull the cable of the left hand needle tip. And tuck it in to bring the stitches closer to the tip. This is the working yarn. So this is the right hand needle tip. I pull it out, creating another loop of magic loop. Again, I have 2 loops. And I will continue until the end of the round. So I finished the first half of the round with the 2 knit stitches. I need to have the third one, so I will swap these 2 stitches. Insert the right tip from left to right, slip off 2 stitches, return the purl one onto the left needle tip, and finish knitting the knit stitch. 3 knit stitches. Tighten at the changeover point, purl the first purl stitch, purl the second purl stitch, and I need a third one, so slip from left to right, slip from left to right, left needle tip goes from right to left into these 2 stitches, and then I finish purling the purl stitch, 3 purl stitches, Again, knit stitch number 1, knit stitch number 2, and for the third knit stitch, insert the right tip, left to right, slip off 2 stitches, return the purl stitch onto the left tip, knit the knit stitch. This is how it looks: 3 purl stitches, 3 knit stitches. And continue. Again, purl stitch number 1, purl stitch number 2, and for the third one, slip from left to right, slip from left to right, left tip from right to left, returning the 2 stitches, purl the purl stitch, and continue the same way. This is close to the end of the round. I have purl stitch number 1, purl stitch number 2, and for the third one, again, slip from left to right, slip from left to right, return from right to left onto the left tip, purl the purl stitch, and I have 2 knit stitches left. Knit stitch number 1, knit stitch number 2. So I finished the round. I'm turning the work around, and again I will pull out the cable of the left hand needle, tuck the needle in, and bring the stitches closer to the tip. And then pull out the right hand needle tip, again creating 2 loops of magic loop. I have now 2 knit stitches at the end of the round and 1 knit stitch at the beginning. And I can continue the 3x3 rib as usual. Knit the first stitch, tighten at the changeover point, then I will work 3 purl stitches in the usual way, then 3 regular knit stitches in the usual way. Three purl stitches, 3 knit stitches, and so on. I'll work a few more rounds to create a more substantial sample, and then I will return and show how to address this jog. How to make it disappear. So this is the beginning of the round. There is a jog here, and I'll make it disappear. I'm going to thread the yarn tail on my tapestry needle. And then if we look closer, to the right of the yarn tail, there is a half a stitch, this one. And I will insert my needle back to front into that stitch and pull the yarn tail through, like this. Then turn the work around, and again to the right of the yarn tail, there is a half stitch, this one. And I will insert my needle into that stitch front to back, and then back to front into the stitch on the left, and pull the yarn tail through. That's it. It's done. The jog is no longer present. It disappeared. One more thing I want to show is how to weave in the yarn tail. I will follow the direction of the yarn in the stitches. So first like this, and then just going up. And so on. At this point, it's a good idea to place a marker of the beginning of the round, because it might be difficult to find it later. Also, the beginning of the round can be moved by 1 or 2 stitches in either direction. It will not be noticeable because the joining is so jogless, nobody will ever know. There it is, a 3x3 rib with a tubular cast on, jogless in the round using magic loop. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.